First issue with health began when I was very young. My mother, when I was born, could not breastfeed me. And at the time, what she did was the doctor came and said, don't worry about it. It's the 1970s. Breastfeeding was not really considered that important anyway. We have formula, which is far superior to breast milk. We'll go on that. So my mom put me on the formula, and within about 2 days, I broke out in head-to-toe eczema, covering my whole body, which is an atopic dermatitis, itching, red, and excoriated skin. My mom got so freaked out, she brought me back to the hospital and said, we got to do something about this. We got to do something about this. The doctor said, don't worry. We got corticosteroid cream. That will help. Just put that on. Now, the interesting thing about corticosteroid cream is it covers the symptom, and the eczema may go away in some part, but it came out in another part. So I was just covered in all these skin issues over and over and over again. I don't have a lot of memories about when I was really young, but one of the memories I do have was sitting there in my underwear like this, with my mom lathering on the cream back and forth all over my body, and then because she didn't want me to itch it off, she'd wrap me in saran wrap. So I'm lying in bed, this mummified child covered in cream and everything, wondering what the heck is going on. School is also a little bit difficult because kids at school are interesting. They have their own diagnoses and way of explaining how conditions are. And one of the diagnoses I got was cooties because I believe eczema is a physical manifestation of cooties. So I had cooties pretty much all through school. As things kept going on, things got worse. I started getting other kinds of conditions. I became allergic to things. I was allergic to cats, dogs, plants, animals, whatever it may be, and then I started getting asthma. I was on inhalers. So when I came to school, kids had their books and their bags coming to school, and I had my utility belt with my asthma containers, my corticosteroids, my antihistamines, my cream, my Vaseline. I had all these things. I was coming to school like a tool man ready to work. And this kept going on and on and on. Things kept getting worse. I kept trying to ask, why is this happening to me? Like, why are all these symptoms happening? And by the time I was about 15, my mother finally took me to a doctor that specialized in nutritional care. And after doing some testing, they found out I was allergic to certain foods. They told me to remove those foods, and within 2 weeks, I noticed a massive change, probably the biggest change I experienced in my whole life. And over the course of the time I was with that doctor, he taught me about many things. But probably the most profound lesson that I learned is that health is not something that happens to us, but it's something that we are active participants in. Individual health is not a concept or an idea. It is a life journey. How do we evoke a global health change that can change the world, literally? You know, the answer is not far away from what you might think. The answer lies in each and every one of us, that individual health is essential to global health. We live in a time where people are literally dying to know about health, and the stats are scary out there. By the year 2025, we predict that the people living with diabetes is expected to double. 30% of children right now are at high risk of becoming obese. And if that trend continues, they predict that value is going to rise as high as 50% by 2030, which is not far away. Some of these trends have led many doctors to believe that children born after the year 2000 may not live as long as their parents. This is a very staggering statistic. The rise in illnesses, autism, attention deficit hyperactive types disorders, chronic disease, hormonal dysfunctions, has led to something really interesting that is happening right now, a dual mortality curve. Normally a mortality curve goes like this, it's very low, and then it spikes up near the end, around the 70s and 80s. But what we're having now is a curve that's spiking up near the end, and then one that's starting in the 30s and 40s and 50s as well, a dual mortality curve. This has put massive strain on the health industry, massive strain on doctors and the healthcare in Canada, and a massive dependency on pharmaceutical medications to alleviate our symptoms. You know, we live in a time where people are literally dying to know about health. And you see it from all ages. You know, the average Canadian child is on at least 2 or 3 prescription medications per year. And you can see this right from the very young. In my practice, we have kids coming into the practice all the way up to seniors. From the age of 0 to 5, you're on antibiotics, all the cillins and cyclins for your ear infections, throat infections, nose infections, lung infections. By 5 to 15, you're on neurological modulators like Ritalin. 15 to 20, you're on diet pills, appetite suppressants, fat trappers, and then we go on Accutane for our skin issues in our mid-20s. 25 to 30, you're on pain medication. By the time you're 30 to 40, you're so burnt out, you're going Prozac or some kind of antidepressants. 40 to 50, you're on high cholesterol medications for your inflammatory conditions and blood vascular disorders. By 50 to 55, you're on creams, putting on creams, taking pills, and all these things for hormone dysfunctions. And by the time you're age 55 to 65, you're on medications for digestive disorders to make you go, to make you stop, to make the digestion work, to make your acid low, to make your acid high, all these things to regulate digestion and motility. And by the time you're over 65, you're on everything else. The average Canadian over the age of 65, on a survey, was found that they're on at least 3 prescription medications, one of which may prevent side effects from the other 2. You know, are we living in a society where people are suffering from drug deficiencies? Or is it a society where people are suffering from perhaps nutritional lifestyle deficiencies? When I was in school, it was interesting. I was taught that health was a function of organ vitality, that when you're born with a full glass of water, literally, almost like a fuel tank. And this is either genetically determined or just luck of the draw, whatever you have. So when you're born, your life is a full glass of water. And as you live your life, you start utilizing your organ reserve, and it starts going down, and then we get to middle age, and it goes down and down and down and down until at some point in time, we expire. Everything's done. What I've come to realize is that health is actually not a full glass of water. We are born with an empty glass. There's nothing in the glass. When you're born, the health is totally there, your vitality is totally high, and everything is clean. And as we live our life, we start filling it up with stuff. Now, stuff that's good, like nutrition, doesn't really count. But I'm talking about stuff your body cannot metabolize. Things like toxins in the environment, chemicals in foods, additives, dyes, things the body was never meant to metabolize, start filling up the cup. Now, if I leave that cup there for a couple of hours or maybe even a day, you'll start to see the water evaporate. And that's how the body works. The body's brilliant. The body will actually start to detoxify some of these things through our liver, through our kidneys, especially if we take care of it. So as long as what we put in the cup is less than what evaporates, that cup will stay empty and we'll stay healthy. But that's not the case. The lifestyle that a lot of people lead does not lead to that. We're nutrient deficient. We take in foods our body was never meant to metabolize, and we start filling up the cup. Now, when we get to about here, something interesting happens. The body produces a sign telling us, hey, there's something going on. You better deal with it. It produces a symptom, right? But what we do, we cover symptoms. We don't like symptoms. We want to take something to deal with that symptom. But it never deals with why the symptom's there in the first place. So what happens is the cup fills up more and more and more. Now, we may be not feeling the symptoms, but it's still making the cup fill up. And at some point in time, the cup gets all the way near to the top. And this is when the body produces a symptom you can't ignore. This is the concept of chronic disease. And eventually, at some point, if we still cover the symptoms, we have overflow. And this is where health is in this country. It doesn't have to always be this way. The individual choices we make today can and do make a difference. People are not born with inherent knowledge on what to do for health. It has to be conditioned into us. And I believe there are three things that people need to have this. The first is education. The second is accountability. And the third is empowerment. Education is an interesting thing. When I was in school, I learned lots of great courses. I learned, English, I learned art, I learned drama, I learned, math, science, and it was awesome. In university, it got even more specialized. I started focusing on my science program. I was learning about the ologies, like virology, pathology, pathophysiology, all these courses about disease and how the body works in disease. I even took a course elective called Death and Dying. That was my elective, Death and Dying. But there was no courses on health, no courses on understanding how to take care of yourself, how to foods you properly. They think you just learn that from home, but a lot of people do not. But I was lucky. Growing up in Oakville with immigrant parents was always an interesting thing. My parents did not care what other people thought about them. They did not care. I used to come home and be like, Mom, how come, my friend has all these kinds of foods and we don't get that? And this is the line my parents always used. They'd say, that's just the way it is. Get used to it. That's just the way it is. Well, they don't like coming over here because you don't have all the food they really like. Oh, they don't have to come over here then, do they? Right, I'd open up my pantry. My friends would be like, let's go eat something, Jason. So we'd open up the pantry, and there'd be like dried herbs and like Chinese things and mushrooms and all these extracts in there. And my friends would be like, man, your mom's a witch. She's got all this stuff in there. And I don't even know what that is. And then I go over to my friend's house, and it was amazing. We'd open up the pantry, and we'd just stand there in awe. There'd be like Oreo cookies, all of these kinds of processing ingredients and foods and things. And we just went crazy. It was awesome, but my mom didn't care. She's like, if you want to eat that stuff, you can go over to your friend's house. But here, you eat what I give you, and that's just the way it is. My mom had rules that she taught me, rules that she didn't even really teach it to me. It just happened. It was part of what my mom did, right? Rule number one is label reading. My mom, every time we bought food, she'd pick it up and read the back. She wouldn't look at the front, she'd read the back. And her rule was like this: if you can't understand what is written on the back of the package, neither can your body. Right? My mom had no science background at all, but she knew if a word on the back in the ingredients started with a number, like that 3-4 dihydro, whatever. She knew there was something wrong with that. She knew that you couldn't metabolize, you couldn't eat that, and you're not going to have that. The other rule my parents had is no kid food. No kid food. When I was born, from the age of 0 to 2, my mom made all the food for me, like baby food. She pureed stuff. She got the vegetables. She did all these things. And then once I hit 2, my mom was like, that's it. We're done with that. He's adult food now. And I went right to like whatever my parents ate, which was more traditional Chinese diet. So that was it, right? There's no other food in between. But what I find in practice is this huge issue. You got kids eating pretty good between the age of 0 and 2, and then they get this whole stage of food that's garbage, all the processed food. You got the pre-toddler food, the toddler food, the tween food, the like teen food, and it's all processed, garbage, colors, dyes, chemicals, comes out of boxes, low-grade material. And the sad thing is, by the time the kid's in their teens, the parents are like, I don't understand why they don't eat healthy. They used to when they were like 2. But they've gone through all these conditions. They've been deconditioned for all these years, eating all this garbage. By the time they're done, they don't want broccoli. They want Haagen-Dazs. They want all these kinds of things. They want sugar. They want pop. They want processed foods. And they have no interest in anything healthy because they haven't had it for so long. How can you expect them to go back to that, right? The other mentality my parents had, I call it the immigrant mentality of food preparation. My mom always did this. Every time I went to the store, I'm like, Mom, can we buy this? She'd be like, no. And the line was always like this. Why would I want to go buy that food when I can make it myself, it's cheaper, and it's better, right? And then she'd say that to me all the time. My mom would slave over the stove for hours to make a meal just to save a few bucks. But she's like, you know what? It's better, and I know what's in the food. Whereas the North American mentality a lot of the time is, why would I want to go make that food when I can buy it, and it's faster? And the last thing my mom taught me was always do this. She would say, spend a lot, eat a little. Meaning my mom, didn't grow up with a lot of money, but when she went out and bought food, she bought the best food she could afford, and she would make the best meal she possibly could. Whereas I find nowadays for a lot of people, they spend as little as possible and eat as much as they can get. It's all about mass, right? The all-you-can-eat Grand Slam breakfast buffets and all these kinds of things. They just go crazy over it. Spend a lot, eat little. These are things my parents taught me very early on, things that were conditioned. They didn't sit down and say, this is the lesson we're going to learn. Their life was the lesson. How they raised me was the lesson. And when you become knowledgeable of things, you can then become accountable. The key to health is doing the right thing for a long time. The field of nutrigenomics is a really interesting topic. Nutrigenomics is a study of how genes are affected by nutrition and lifestyle. We seem to think that our genetic coding is black and white, like it's a book, that it's all written in there and it cannot change. It is set in stone. And that's true. You can't really change the genes at all, but we can change how those genes are read. That is called the phenotype. So the genotype is static, the phenotype is not. And what determines the phenotype is our lifestyle, how we live, has a huge impact on our body. So even though we have a coding that's set in our body, we can still change. That's being individually accountable to health. What we do on a daily basis has a massive effect on our life. The last thing about that is we can also be accountable globally as well. Patients will often say, well, why do people put out these kinds of foods anyway? Like, why are these companies doing these things? The reason why companies put out foods that are processed, sugar-laden, and chemically derived is because we keep buying them. We keep buying them, so of course they're going to put it out. But when you can become accountable, you start realizing that these things are not ideal for you. We start realizing that these things affect us in a negative way. We stop buying the products, and you can actually make companies accountable, right? It changes. The choices we make not only affect our life, but affect many lives, right? On a huge scale. Empowerment. The best predictor of future health is to create it today, right? There's a saying that says, the good news is our health is in our control. The bad news is that our health is in our control, right? There are people all over the world right now that are in this health movement. And sometimes it's overt, meaning they're going out there and they're educating people. They're talking to people. They're telling people things they should do. They're joining exercising groups. They're doing running groups. They're doing clinics. They're doing nutrition workshops. These are huge steps. But a lot of people, it's not an overt thing. It's more covert. It's hidden. It's something they do on their own, through their own life. They take care of themselves. And what happens is people around them start looking at them and going, what are you doing? How are you doing that? It's like, well, I do this and this and this. And their life becomes the message. You don't have to be overt. You can do it on your own. Right? There's a concept in planetary health that goes like this. It says, think locally, act act locally, think globally. When it comes to health, you have one more step in front of that. Focus personally, act locally, think globally. Mahatma Gandhi said, we have to be the change we wish to see in the world. The future of healthcare does not lie in an institution or a pill. It lies in each and every one of us. One person can make a difference. Thank you.